Hey, good afternoon, Scott. How are you today?
Carl, nice to see you.
Great. Well, it's always great to see you, and you know that. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time and the effort to help us put this recording together. I've always felt like your story is very unique and is something that I think a lot of people would like to hear. And it's very gracious of you to offer your time to put together this video so that we can learn a little bit more about you, your experiences, how you got started in the business, talk a little bit about your practice, and then I want to take you to the actual coaching experience that you had with us. We coached off and on for the last 5 years, and it's been a great relationship. I consider you a friend as opposed to a coaching client, but I'd love to hear your side of the story, even though I probably know a little bit about it. But I'm going to turn it over for you. Let's start with how you got started and where it all started.
Yeah,
And I'll
sure.
turn it over to you now. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks for having me, Carl. I guess the story started 10 years ago when I joined my dad's practice, Virginia Wealth Management Group. I entered, at the lowest ranks, sort of as our administrative client service associate. My dad had been a successful advisor for many years, but had a small group of wealthy clients that he had dealt with. Um, and I went to William and Mary. I'm an avid golfer, and so I went to college on a golf scholarship. And as I was trying to decide what I'd want to do, um, it sort of evolved. But the idea of joining my dad right out of school became the primary focus my last year or two. So. Like I said, that was 10 years ago, and things have evolved over time. Today, we are still a three-person team, so small by design, but we serve about 90 families, up from about 30 when I joined my dad. And that's sort of how our practice is set up. We're small by design, 90 families we deal with, three folks, and my dad and I are sort of the principals of our firm.
Sure. Scott, I remember some of our earlier conversations, and we talk about things like, well, number one, you're a fantastic golfer. In fact, I think if you don't today, you did at one time, maybe still do hold the course record for the golf course that you normally play on, and that of course makes you a very desirable person to play with because a lot of golfers are always looking for a tip as to how to improve their game. And I know from just the amount of practicing that you've done and just the conversations that I've had with you that you know an awful lot about the game and you know an awful lot about the equipment. And I know that you've coached some of your clients as well to help them improve their game. So talk a little bit about that, how you got started with that social networking aspect, using golf essentially as the conduit for that.
Yeah, well, I think it ties back into how my dad built his practice. He was, as I mentioned, a successful sort of solo practitioner advisor, and he started in the 1980s, basically building relationships with people. He recognized that it was a relationship business, and he too played golf in college and was a very good amateur golfer, and still is today, in his mid 60s. But that was something that we identified early on that could really help me build our practice. And it's not as much being a good golfer, though certainly in certain ways that helps, but it's the opportunity to meet different groups of people. So, where golf has been instrumental is you spend 4 hours with somebody. If you're strategic about meeting certain people or setting up a golf game with certain people. It can be very valuable to a business like ours. I'm very conscious of playing golf with different people. So some high-level golfers will only play with other scratch golfers or that sort of thing. I've got 5 or 6 different groups of friends that I play with at all different levels. And certainly the way you act on a golf course can really set the tone for a relationship. We've all played golf, those of us who do, with people who get upset after a bad shot or whatnot. But certainly there's between managing money and playing golf, there are not two more humbling activities you could do. So, but it's been a big and important part of our practice in terms of meeting different people. I would say that's so much more important than whether you're a scratch golfer or you're a 20 handicap.
I think it was Malcolm Gladwell, and correct me if I'm wrong, that said that, you have to do something 10,000 times to get it right. But I'm sure that after 10,000 strokes, it's still very likely that someone like you could even put the next shot in the water, which kind of kills the whole rule about 10,000 times because, and even yesterday when we were watching the Masters, of course, you saw Schauffele in that last or second to last hole, he put that one in the water and kind of killed him there for a couple of strokes. But here you are in Virginia Beach, Virginia Wealth Management. You're a golfer, you're doing social networking. Tell me about how some of those conversations worked for you and how did you actually start to build relationships?
Well, maybe a little more history would help too. So, I mentioned I started as an administrative, client associate at the practice. And in 5 years, we had a nice little business, but that's when we decided to start coaching. Um, Coaching was actually a big part of how I started to turn some of the relationships I was building into business relationships. So I would say I spent 4 or 5 years without really knowing it, building relationships with different people. The question about how I did that, I mean, I don't have a better answer other than we started working with Oechsli, and of course, you and I started working together, Carl. It was strategic intent. It's something, a very Oechsli term that we talk about all the time. We can get into some more of the details. You and I had a coming to Jesus moment or so, after 3 or 4 months. But it was about doing the activities to build our business and to hold myself accountable in different ways. And I'll let you kind of help me decide or help me talk about which ones you think were the most impactful. But there's no doubt the accountability aspect and building a routine with strategic intent was that was what it was all about.
Well, I think I told you this before. Number one, I think you're very engaging and you have a very transparent way about you. And I think transparency is one of the greatest ways to build trust. So I think that you're very, very good at building trust very, very quickly with people. But then again, that critical thing of, okay, how did I turn that social connection and that trust into a business conversation, which was probably a real inflection point for you is that, okay, how am I going to take it to that point where, you know what, we've had the social, we built it to this point. Now, how do I say to that person who maybe is 20, 30 years older than I am, maybe is a business owner, could be a multimillionaire, how do I actually break that barrier? So how did you actually do that?
Well, specifically, Carl, it was a lot of role playing with you, honestly. So, and there were little things, you and I would have conversations about, hey, how would you phrase this? How would you, how do we talk about our business? How do you bring up, can I put my business hat on for a second? But the more organic and the more natural it is, the better. And maybe that was what the 4 or 5 years I had before we started coaching, when my role really became more building the practice. Maybe that was an advantage too, because I'd already started to build a bunch of relationships that were not sales focused. So, the key to social prospecting, a great advisor in Williamsburg, Virginia, who also went to William Mary, told me, he said, it's all about getting the fish to chase the boat. So I can't tell you, I mean, a dozen times you and I would have a lengthy role playing about, hey, this is how I'm going to phrase this. And I'd go 12 or 14 holes riding with somebody I wanted to bring up business with, and they turn to me and say, hey, I can't stand my advisor. We need to have lunch. So
But that didn't happen that often, did it?
it happened more than I thought it would, but it happened
That's
occasionally.
great.
Yeah, it really, just me, trying to think about, hey, how am I going to bring this up? And they bring it up because they know what you do, and you say some of the right things to guide the conversation toward business. The mini close, as we call it, in some of our Oechsli retreats. But I would say it was the role playing, and then obviously building confidence over time is a big deal.
Sure. I actually remember one client or who became a client. He was a prospect at the time. We won't name his last name, but his first name started with a G. and he was having a relationship with an advisor up north, and something happened up there, and out of the blue, he called you after having said no, no, no so many times, and he just called you out of the blue and said, "I've got to come see you." And
Yeah.
I remember the actual joy in your voice when you called me to tell me, because it was so surprising that that could happen so in such a serendipitous fashion. But the reason was there. The other advisor did something wrong, and you had given him every reason to consider you in the event something bad happened. So, and I'm sure that happened more than one time.
Well, so often it's the little things. You and I joke about sort of the secret. The secret is the handwritten note. We've talked about that many times. But I write people handwritten notes. I've always done it. My mother taught me to do it, and I happen to write in cursive, which is maybe unique. But I write handwritten notes for most anything. If I enjoyed playing around a golf with somebody new, I'll write them a handwritten note. Maybe the secret is that I FedEx it, but I guess the secret will be out now. But yeah, no,
Yes.
the small touches, the surprise and delights, those things make huge impacts in a people business.
One other thing too, Scott, and you really were the one that spearheaded this, because I was still in the formative stages of coming up with an accountability tool. But once you and I settled on a spreadsheet and you started very diligently putting names on that spreadsheet so that we could track your progress, I kind of equated it to you playing golf and having a scorecard, and you were able to see exactly where you were with each relationship, how it was developing, and you and I would have strategy conversations about how can we turn this conversation a little bit more positive, how can we circle back to that person, et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, you became very, very good at it. Share with all of us here. You started with the practice back when we started coaching. You were somewhere around 80 million. So where are you today?
The practice is more than tripled in almost any metric. So today we oversee just short of right about $300 million.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, in 5 or 6 years. There's no doubt the relationship with Oechsli, the relationship with you is the way I describe it is it was the glue that brought some pieces that seemed like they would really work well, but without the glue that brought them together, that certainly never would have happened. But I'm still amazed at the growth our little practice has seen.
Well, I'm not. I think that you've always had all the talent in the world. So I'm not surprised in the least. I could tell immediately that you were going to be a star. So what's in the future? What does the future hold for Virginia Wealth Management and you, and where are you going from here? What's your next phase?
Well, Carl, you and I have had this conversation a few times. I usually say I have no idea. Something sticks in my mind. We've talked about how, certain advisors want to build a very big business, want to acquire. We've talked about different motivations for a business. And, something I always come back to is excellence. It might sound a little bit cheesy maybe, but pursuing excellence, to me, that means great client service. It means doing all of the value adds for our clients that, they work with us for a reason, a small family boutique wealth management practice. So I think we're going to let that idea guide us, meaning when we grow to a size where we don't feel like we can maintain the same level of service we were, then we have to build out. So that's really something I'm keeping my eye on. I don't have, sort of vast goals. We'll hit $1 billion of assets we manage or something like that. We just want to ensure that we are always doing a great job for our clients, and we will grow the practice sort of in lockstep with that.
You recently went through a transition and you stepped up into an RIA platform as opposed to a hybrid platform, but you stayed with the same clearing firm. And from what I recall, you told me that 99 point plus of your client relationships chose to move with you. And that's certainly a real kudos to you and your dad, that the clients felt that highly of you that they in no way, shape, or form second guessed what you guys were doing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but well worth it for many different reasons.
Good. So Scott, thanks very much again for doing this. I see nothing but continued success for you, and I think it's going to be a real bright world for you and your family, and I'm really happy for you as a result of that. You mentioned going from 80 million to close to 300 million. I did the math quickly in my head. That's a compounded growth rate of better than 25% per year, which I think anybody would like to have in our business. So congratulations to you again. And by the way, I wanted to ask you, now that the weather is getting warmer, how many times a week are you playing golf?
Honestly, not as many as I'd like to some degree. I have a 3-year-old at home, and he's a very important part of my life, my family, obviously our business. I would say that I always play one day on the weekend, but I reserve one other day completely to be with the family. I would like to in the summer play one afternoon a week, but I also do sneak out an hour at some point during the week to practice. So maybe that sounds like a lot for some people, but having been a competitive golfer, where the club would feel strange in my hands if I hadn't held it the day before, trying to strike that balance. So.
Well, you were the high school champion, as I recall, in Virginia before you went to William and Mary. So you've obviously got that in your DNA. And I think you told me a little bit earlier you're planning to go out to the practice range right after this call. Is that correct?
Well, I did try on a button-down shirt, but I didn't know if it would leave me enough time to get to the golf course. So, yeah, certainly got my golf shirt on today.
Well, all I can say is hit them straight.
Thank you, Carl.